Students Who Design is a podcast and video series that bridges students and the design industry. By students, for students. Be sure to check out our website, studentswho.design.
This is Students Who Design. Today we'll be talking to Ally Keller, who studies design and technology at Parsons and previously worked at Facebook, Red Antler, and Code and Theory.
In this episode, we'll be covering dropping out of school, transitioning from fashion design to product design, and so much more. And we really hope you enjoy. Students Who Design is sponsored in part by Facebook Design. For more resources and information on designing at Facebook, visit facebook.design and check out open roles at facebook.com/careers.
Hey Ally, first off we'd like to introduce what school you're currently attending, your major, and where you previously worked.
Awesome. Okay, so I go to Parsons School of Design where I study design and technology, and previously outside of New York agency I've worked at Facebook as an intern in product design.
Cool. And can you describe your path to product design?
Yeah, so I think mine is a bit non-traditional in the sense of I jumped from major to major. I went to state school at UNLV because I'm from Vegas, and
UNLV is University of Nevada in Las Vegas.
Yeah,
Very
running
cool.
Rebels, just like the Drake song. So basically, when I got out of high school, I knew that I really wanted to pursue design. But at the time, it just was not like a possibility. My parents had just separated, I needed to be at home, and I went to UNLV instead. So I think that after like doing a year at a state school, I was like, this is gonna kill me. Like I can't do this, and I dropped out of school. I moved to New York.
What made you want to drop out?
Oh, I just knew I couldn't do it.
You couldn't do school or UNLV?
I just couldn't do either.
Oh, okay.
I had really struggled through high school because I was like, I absolutely fucking hate this. I hate being told what to do, and I felt boxed in. So when, I think because I didn't really realize I had dyslexia in math, I was like, fuck this. Like, I can't even comprehend it. And then when I was at a state school, I was in a sorority, and I was just like, I don't think I can focus here. Mm-hmm. And I left all of my friends from elementary school, and we just bought a one-way ticket.
To?
New York.
New York?
Yeah.
Okay. So you ended up in New York, dropped out of school.
Yeah, I dropped out of school.
And why New York, and what were you doing in New York?
Okay, this is gonna sound really corny, but I watched Elf and I really wanted to move to New York City. I really wanted to move to New York after that movie, but also we visited this summer and I pursued a career in fashion beforehand.
Okay, cool. And then, so you're in New York because you watched Elf, interested in fashion. So how'd you go from there, or what did you do in that area, and then how'd you move to product design?
So I worked on both sides of in front of the camera, behind the camera, came here because of a potential modeling contract, and then 2013 Fashion Week for New York. Mm-hmm. And I just was like, I'm not cut out for this. So I then went on to intern for La La Land Artists, which is a really, really cool agency that represents people that are set designers, stylists, people that are really, really well known. And I was getting a feel for the back end of what goes into magazine covers, what goes into the whole creative process, but that wasn't working either. I think I slowly started to realize okay, I really thought I was gonna be in fashion, but that industry wasn't something that was innovative enough for me. Yep. In the sense of that it was very, very repetitive. And they were doing things a very specific way. There was a very chronological order to the way that things on the back end were handled. And for some people, that's awesome. But for me, I was like, I always trust my gut. And my gut was telling me you love fashion and there's something here for you, yeah. But it's more you need to transition into more creative process, creative process.
And then from there on, is that when you decided to reapply to school, or why would you apply to school if you knew you didn't like school?
I didn't apply back to school for about a year. I went and I worked at Apple retail for a year. And I did that, and my best friend there was like, bitch, you need to go to school. And my mom was already on me about it. So I was just as a joke, I kind of was just I'll just apply to school and see if I get in. And I got into FIT, early admission. And I was like, well, guess I'm going back to school now. And my mom was like, please go back to school.
And FIT is?
Fashion Institute of Tech, which is now free for New York State. Oh, and then I transferred to Parsons. It's bounce to bounce to bounce, but Parsons was a school I wanted to go to when I was in high school, and I figured the most creative minds come out of there. For me personally, that I was looking at, and I was like, well, it's fashion, but also there's this whole thing of tech happening there, and I was really interested in investing more time in that.
Cool. So you had a lot of involvement with either hands-on design work, even hardware products.
Yeah.
How did that help you become a better designer, and how did you make the switch over to digital?
So I started with more digital products because I interned at a startup and I was really, really interested in like, okay, how does this UI work? Like, how are we solving and telling these stories in design? And I was really, really resistant to doing hardware. I did not want to, and I wouldn't be doing hardware at all had I not been in my specific major. So school makes iteration very tedious at times, but hardware trains you to be very open to failing. Because failure in hardware is inevitable in the sense of if you're programming an Arduino, like the code is it's just gonna break.
Yeah, it will break, and you have to fix it, and when you make it work, you're happy with it.
Yes, there's nothing more gratifying than when hardware actually works.
Yeah, and so before Parsons, you were enrolled in the General Assembly program, and you did user experience design there. So what are your general thoughts now looking back on design boot camps, and if students who might not be able to go to a design school but still want to get some real experience, what are the pros and cons of attending that program?
If it comes down to a couple things. So if a student doesn't have the financial means to go to design school because it's absolutely absurdly expensive, I really recommend General Assembly because I loved it. But I based my decision on GA off the teacher I had who had previously worked at Google, had like founded a startup, had run with a couple startups, and like helped to craft their design. I think that GA is really effective if you are wanting to change careers or you're just starting out and wanting to understand like the most basic components of UX design. And I think it's really good for people to like get in there and be like, what is a user flow? What is research?
If you have an idea of that, then maybe doing something on your own is more beneficial than enrolling in this type of program.
Yeah, definitely.
Okay. And you're currently enrolled in the Cornell Tech program that has a partnership with Parsons. I was wondering if you could shed more light on that and your experience on that so far.
So this program's been really interesting because it's my first time working with any student outside of a design student in my time at Parsons.
So what kind of students are you working with?
So we have electrical engineering, computer science. We have people that are MBAs, law students that are like wanting to learn more about tech and how I really think their focus is IP. And then what else? There's 2 additional majors that are 2-year programs that I think provide students an opportunity to be really well-rounded in a sense of like CS alongside other things. So as a designer there, it's been fascinating because it's nice to be able to actually see your product be built in real time, but also it teaches you how to collaborate with people that can be, I don't want to say be challenging, but typically there's always this reputation between computer science and design of like it's
engineering versus design.
Yeah. It gives you hands-on experience learning how to navigate those waters, but also, so I just was working with my team and they told me they had never really worked on a collaborative project in undergrad, so it's nice to be able to kind of like go through that process as a team and together, and like they teach me things, I teach them things. It's like a give and take system.
I think a good segue would be like, do you think the disadvantages of going to a design school is that you're kind of boxed into being only surrounded by designers, or what are the advantages and disadvantages of going? Because like you said, it's really expensive, very hard to get into, and a lot of people in the industry might not go to school, or they might study some random major at some school that isn't like RISD.
Yeah.
So what are your thoughts around attending a design school?
I mean, I think that the truth of the matter is you really don't have to go to design school to be an amazing designer. What design school does for you though is builds your network and gives you a chance to fail in a safe space.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
So in the sense that like if your stuff doesn't work, you just get a B, but nothing, no metrics or no money or nothing really happens to you or what you're working on.
In my specific major, so my cousin is an architecture student at Columbia, and they receive a limited amount of A's, B's, C's. The reason that my GPA is like, so basically at Parsons, GPA is a thing, but it's generally high for students because grades and the whole concept of grades at art school is like so subjective. It's really hard to grade an art project, and I don't know, the thing to me is that design school is just a place for you to kind of like express yourself. You get to be really expressive and really open your mind in a way that like sometimes might feel very uncomfortable. So you get comfortable with creating things that you know are trash. You get comfortable with like being around students that are insanely talented. That I think that's the one thing that I would say is the advantage is the students are there.
You're able to. You always know there's someone better than you, and like
Oh, yeah.
the whole imposter syndrome thing is probably very real.
Oh, it's so real. I mean, it's so real. It hurts. It's so real because you'll be in like say you're in the laser cutting lab, for example, at Parsons, which is an architecture building. So you might be cutting and have like done the math behind creating a box, which is the most challenging thing ever because you have to think about the material density and the height and the width, and then the person next to you will be like with a bunch of metal, like creating like a organic shape that's going to be turned into a chair that is like their thesis. Yeah, it's so intimidating. I just feel like I look at some people's projects and I'm just like, I suck. Like, fuck this. Like, I don't even need to do this anymore.
And so you kind of, well, one thing I wanted to ask is like, if you say that, design school is maybe not worth it in the long term.
Yeah.
You've dropped out once.
Yeah.
So what has been the thoughts about still sticking it out with Parsons?
Oh my God, this is gonna sound so bad. I love to shop and I love nice things, and when money gets involved, it gets hard to think about school versus career. I'm just like, well, if I was freelancing, I mean, this is a conversation that I had with Cam, and it was like, 'cause she came to New York on a work trip, and I was just like, girl, like, I wanna work, like, I got a lifestyle to fund.
Yeah.
So that's, I think when you leave school, say, like as a dropout that came back to school, that's the hard part is like, I got used to that freedom and that ability to be like, I'm gonna travel when I want to, I'm gonna go home, I'm gonna do what I want, I'm gonna live the life I want. And at school, like, I feel so controlled and regimented.
Yeah.
But I don't know, ultimately it's probably very good to finish my degree.
Yeah.
It's important. Like, it was important to me, it was important to my family, but most importantly, I think it was like, I have to finish something in life, and this is like, I have to do it. Like,
So
I have to.
You attended a state school, a fashion school, a design boot camp, and freelance on your own. And I'm sure there's students in like any one of those 5 situations, or like maybe a 6th one I'm forgetting. Now looking back, and if you had to do it all over again, which one would you pursue and finish all the way?
That's a tough one. For sure, probably would have started off with design school, but not put so much pressure on myself to intern at the same time, and would have gone into architecture, for sure.
And why architecture versus like design that'll help with the digital stuff you do now?
I would definitely be doing digital on the side, but I think architecture, for some reason, the classes that I'm taking right now in the School of Constructed Environments, it helps you to open your mind. I think what happened with me was I got really stubborn about the career path I wanted after going to GA. I got really stubborn. I was like, I just want to be a UX designer.
Yeah.
But when I've been taking these architecture courses, it is helping me so much as a digital product designer because it forces you to think about the bigger picture. Like when you're thinking about architecture, in some sense, you're thinking about surrounding an individual and like their mind, body, soul, which is something that I like to bring into digital product design a lot.
Yeah, but it's hard when you're like a 16-point font and like you're stuck in the system.
It is. It's very
No, it's
systematic.
extremely hard.
It is. I get stuck in boxes. That was like
literally and figuratively.
Yes. Oh my God. I just fucking hate that feeling of being like confined to like a set of like negative and positive space. Yeah. It drives me crazy.
So, and I like to talk about your professional or career exposure. So to start off, how did you get your first design internship, and what did you do to stand out in that first stage of recruiting, especially coming from like a very non-traditional design background?
Yeah, so I was really, really fortunate to have a good friend at an agency called Red Antler. And at the time, she was an executive assistant, and they were looking for a UX intern. So I just wrapped up GA, and she was like, give me your stuff. Like, I'll send it in to the UX lead, and we'll see if you're a good fit.
Yep.
So do you want me to go into that?
Yeah. Let's dive deep into that.
Okay, cool.
So, I mean, like, I think it's easy. It's very, not easy, but like relatively easier to find someone at a company you might like, whether that's through a friend of a friend or like an alumni from your school or just going to a design meetup. And I think, like you can definitely get them to refer you or put your name in, but you still have to interview, right? And so the hardest part about interviewing is like, how do you interview for a design position if you haven't had a previous one and gotten a case study out of it?
It's so hard and it's so tricky, and I remember being so fucking scared. I was just like, I don't know if I know what I'm doing.
Yeah.
I just like at the time I didn't even really know how to use Sketch. Like it was really hard. I had only done one project on Sketch, and I was like, barely like an envision project. So what they had me do in order to kind of understand my design thinking was just an exercise of like, they gave me a really challenging.
This is Red Antler.
Yeah, this is Red Antler. Like when I transferred into Parsons, this was like spring semester, so like January sometime like a couple years ago, and they had me like run through my thinking and just like gave me an issue. And at the time, I think it was like Airbnb had been under fire for some safety and like health checks or something like that. Along those lines, there was like a very serious issue in making sure that hosts were ensuring that their guests were safe. So they had me run through that.
Was this the article? I think it was like a cover photo of like this kid on a swing and a tree falling. Yeah, no, I remember this. Okay.
Yes.
So they centered the challenge around this real world event.
Yes, it was really hard.
What was the challenge?
So they were like, think about this issue and find a way to ensure that guests feel safe throughout their time using Airbnb. Or I'm not phrasing that properly. Basically, find a solution for guests that have like an emergency incident.
So someone who just finished GA, just going into design school, and your first interview, you had a design challenge. What did you do?
Oh my God, I was shook. So I interviewed people, and at the time, the Parsons had a really active Facebook group. Okay. So I posted in there, I was like, look, I'll buy you a cup of coffee if I can just sit down with you. And I was really shocked by the amount of people that were like, oh, actually, this is when Airbnb was much more popular in New York City, because since then.
Because of all those, like the laws changed and whatnot, yeah.
It sucks.
So everyone had their 2 cents.
Yeah, they did. Shockingly, students had like been renting out their rooms at home. So one girl was from Canada. She was renting out her apartment in Canada while she was at Parsons. Another dude was like running a circus. So his boss owned 7 apartments in New York City, and he was just basically making sure that guests were checked in at all the different ones. And he was just like telling me how this was all running.
So why did you try to interview or talk to users first when you got this challenge? Especially since the challenge was like find a solution to this issue, what made you want to go and ask people?
I felt like I couldn't wrap my head around the specific issue because I had never used Airbnb.
Oh,
so at that time, it was like 2.5 years ago. I hadn't used it yet. I knew the app was gorgeous, but like I was like, I don't really know what this consists of. Yeah. And I like to sometimes do user research a little bit backwards. Like as much research as I can get when I don't know about a problem, I just like to hear people's voice and hear where their headspace is at. So for me, that was like a nice segue into thinking about what specific problems to solve and what issues exist. So at that time, I was just like trying to figure out like, there's no content readily available online. Like their legal team is top notch, and I think they were doing their best to like kind of
like make sure it wasn't too public.
Yeah, to kind of just mitigate that situation. Yeah. I didn't realize like how big of an issue that was. And then I did a walkthrough of the app, and I was just like, how do I contact somebody in the case of an emergency? So at the time, I just really needed to hear more, I think, and that gave me an opportunity to like get into a headspace of not just a person using the app, but somebody providing a service on it.
No, that's true. And so you interviewed all those people. I'm sure you covered a lot of different things you never heard about.
Yeah.
And what did you do with that information, and how did you present that to Red Antler?
So in retrospect, I was like, I want to just die of humiliation when I think of this. So my email had been like, sketch out like what the issue is. And I was just like, sketch as in sketch the app or sketch on paper. Yeah. So I just sketched it out on paper, and it just went through a couple of mobile screens of like how they could improve and better surface when to contact them in the case of an emergency, and providing like, I think on the primary navigation, like a direct way of contacting them and the steps to take in the case of something major happening. It was so long ago, I can't exactly remember, but I basically just put that into a deck and presented it to them. Mm-hmm. And my manager at the time, who was UX lead, really was like, you did a good job on this. This is like your first project ever. You know, we really like the way that you work through your process. I think that we can bring you on.
And how did you build? So you got your first internship at Red Antler, and how did you build up from there?
I think the thing with Red Antler was that they had a lot of work, and they constantly gave me opportunities to work on projects. So my manager at the time, I think in my time there, I worked on 6 projects that might have launched. I believe 6 launched, but like maybe 10, 15 projects total, because
that's a lot of projects.
It was a lot in a year, and about roughly a year there. It was
a
lot.
Like a year-long internship. or a co-op type of thing?
I think I interned with them for like maybe 3-4 months throughout the semester. I interned for the semester. I was brought on freelance, and then December I left and went back to interning at Code and Theory.
Okay, so you worked at a couple of very well-respected places like Code and Theory, Red Antler, Facebook. And so the difference is just by face value is that they're agencies versus product, right? Red Antler being very, very good agency and Facebook being a very good product company. And what are some of the similarities and differences between the work you do and what do you prefer and why?
Okay, that's a really good one. Okay, so I'll start with the differences between product and with agency. So agency design is always the deliverable is to hand off a product to a client or to pitch to a client or to sell work. And what I loved about that type of work was that you are touching so many different things and you're allowed to just experience so many different topics. On product, the difference is that you're really crafting an experience and you're really digging into what it means to be a digital product designer.
Okay, so in an agency you probably wear a lot more hats than
Yeah.
you do as like a product designer at a product company or like a non-agency company?
In my experience in New York agency, and I've heard it's different from coast to coast, New York agency, we were really segmented into roles. So I was just a UX intern, and then there was like a visual designer that would take the work, and then there was a motion designer. At Facebook, I was obsessed with the fact that it's not just pushing like work in a specific role, but you get to do everything.
Yeah.
So I think product pushes you to be a very, very well-rounded designer versus agency, which helps you to specialize.
In a certain part of the design, whether that's visual, motion,
Yes, yes, absolutely.
Okay. So you went through 3 internships and you're headed back to Facebook. What would you recommend to students who might be in their very first design internship at a startup or like something local or anything, and they want to jump to either big tech company or a really big agency?
I think the thing is that I was most grateful for in my experience is get a mentor first, but do as much work as you possibly can. Like whether that means you're doing your internship at your startup and then you're trying to book a freelance project on the side, but like touch as many moving parts as you can because it helps you just get practice. Like practice, because that was something from every single step that I took from Red Antler to Code to Facebook. Every single time it was just more and more work to practice on. And from each of those roles as a design intern, it was like I knew that maybe one of my strengths was like being in product strategy versus visual design needed a lot of work for me.
Yeah.
So having the opportunity to constantly just work on things constantly, it's the best way to make yourself the best designer possible, if that makes sense.
So this last segment is questions that we ask everyone on the show. And it's essentially what is on the mind of students who want to get into design or who are currently in design. So we surveyed a bunch of people on Facebook, Medium, Twitter, etc., and this is what they want to know about. So the first one is, having the experience that you do, there's probably some things you feel like the design industry doesn't quite get about the student design community. We're wondering if you could speak a little bit to that.
Yeah, so for me, what I think big tech companies and what startups fail to really recognize is the speed at which they're innovating and how students are having a really hard time identifying what job they'll fit into. So a couple years ago, some of these roles didn't exist, and it's really hard when you're learning in design school a specific skill set, and it's super hard to identify what you're learning in school, how that translates into real world outcome. Like digital design is something that I fell into on accident, and I don't know how I would discover that being in my specific major, working with hardware, if I wasn't hungry enough to go out there and find it. So it's just a challenge. I think that's just very challenging.
So that community operates much faster than we do, probably because we're in school.
Yes.
Meaning that our product thinking and just development overall won't be as good because of the speed we're moving at.
Absolutely. There's things that I learned working and interning that made me like a way better designer than what I would have learned at school, but sometimes it's really hard because it's like when you're not interning and you're just in school, you want to keep up. It's like this weird thing. Yeah.
So you have a lot to manage from, both from school and life in general. How do you try to stay on top of it all?
Oh my God. There's so many tears, so many sleepless nights. Okay, so because I dropped out of school, I'm really fortunate. I'm really blessed to have like a very supportive partner. So Elliot makes life so much easier. My mom steps in all the time to like really support my sister and I in school. But I think on top of it all, I firmly believe if you are going to school and you're working, or if you're doing one or the other, you have to work out and take care of your body. So I believe in working out like 5 to 6 days a week on like a positive week, but at least getting in that gym like 3 days a week. Take care of yourself, because the two things that I think the two things I was taught really, really early on from a mentor was no one can eat for you and no one can work out for you. So
That's true.
those are two things I think really help on top of all that other stuff.
And so there's so many articles, blogs, newsletters, and all this noise in the design industry. And how do you filter out what's good versus what's just noise?
Recently, I started going to specific community groups on Instagram and watching their stories. So that's weirdly the new thing I'm doing, because there's this group that I'm really inspired by, this co-working spot here called The Wing. Okay. And it's a women's collective, but they host the most amazing guest lecturers, from designers to chefs to just people that are out there as entrepreneurs. So recently, I've tried to broaden my horizons. In design specifically, I'm always looking for specific like insight from a designer, but going and watching videos is really helping me digest information more clearly, because at this point I realize I'm just going to articles and scanning through them. Mm-hmm. I always like to read a book on the train if I can, from an author that is just fantastic, but that's always hard to find a great book. So video is the way I'm consuming content that's really good right now, and just snippets of it is helping me.
And do you have any mentors that you follow or that you have to stay inspired, or things that act as pseudo-mentors, like places, websites, or any other resource on the web?
Yes, okay, so mentors from back at home that helped me get to New York, absolutely stay in touch with my former boss. Also, mentors in the fact that Facebook actually gave me my first mentors in years. And like people like Gina, Chloe, Dabney, Andy, like I hadn't had a mentor in a long time until I went there. And then also mentors in New York City that just helped me as an intern, like on top of all that stuff. And then resources. You know what? I firmly believe that if you go to Site Inspire or Site Brutalist, it is so dope to see some of the work that like people that are like not even always designers are doing, and like getting outside of the gridlock, like just doing 3-dimensional space stuff on the web. I love going there. That keeps me very inspired. That's like when I was in agency, that was like my goal, to get on there.
And as a current design leader at Parsons, I'm sure a lot of people come up to you and ask you, how do I get into design? Even though they go to design school.
Yeah.
Are there pieces of immediate actionable advice you think that would help a similar person listening to this episode now?
Yes, don't be afraid to be a stalker. Like, I know that sounds really weird, but like in the sense of this, like find people that inspire you, that are in your immediate area, reach out to them and be like, hey, can I get a cup of coffee? I just want to hear about your process and your journey. And those types of conversations are really constructive and helping you identify entry points into starting a career in design. Also, I firmly believe in writing recruiters and being like, hey, your firm, I really like it. I recognize that you're a recruiter. I just want to know if there's any opportunities. And that follow-up and those types of interactions, relationships are like instrumental, I believe, in design, because there's so many of us in it. But I tell students all the time that like your relationships will define the path that you're taking, and they'll define the access to big companies that will be readily available to you all the time. So I just believe like your network is real, like your network's so powerful, and learning how to position yourself based off those who inspire you is never a bad thing.
And we've talked about what you've done and how you got there and what's on your mind. And our last question is, what is next for you?
Okay, is it inside of design or outside of design?
It could be anything. It could be what you're going to eat tomorrow. It could be
Okay, you guys are going to laugh at me, but in 5 to 10 years, I really think that I'm going to own a jet ski stand on Miami Beach. That's all stand like I want to rent jet skis to people, and everyone thinks I'm joking when I say this, but I'm so serious. Like, I love Miami, and I think ultimately my goal is to do design, launch products, build my own business by having this jet ski stand, or as a designer. But there's something in the simplicity of life out there that I really like, and I like this whole possibility of like unconventional things that people do, like maybe like somebody sells like a multi-million-dollar company, but they end up with this really weird career, and I see that as like my really really weird career that I really want.
As in a weird career selling jet skis in Miami.
Like, I really want to have people come and do tours on these jet skis in Miami Beach and like have this like technology enabled stand that like everything's done digitally, there's no cash transaction, everything is like online, but with exceptional customer service. And I believe in that Apple retail model. It's like they feed you the juice. They feed you some juice in there. So there's some apple juice, and like I think that like I don't know, I'm really fascinated by this idea of moving to Miami and owning a business or having a business in Vegas, because I think ultimately like I love design, but I also love business as the idea of being an entrepreneur.
So let us know which city you open it to.
I will.
We'll be sure to visit.
I'm going to have those jet skis, and they're going to be pink. I'm telling you right now, they're going to be all pink.
Awesome.
I'm so ready for this, actually. So,
Well, Ally, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you. Awesome. Thank you guys so much. I really thank you for including me in this. Like, it's really nice.
Students Who Design is written and produced by Sahil Koja and Omar Abdul Rahim. Visit our website, studentswho.design, for more information.